This has been months of work, and in fact 3 years of our organization's operations, trying to bring Model UN to a higher ground, both in the policy spheres of the international system and also with grassroots civil society. To this end, I'm extremely welcome and happy to be co-hosting this with the World Federation of UN Associations, who've been a real powerhouse behind Model UN since 1946, so a little bit older than our organization. And of course, joining us later for the opening ceremony, we're very proud to be having the Jamaican ambassador, Mr. Brian Wallace, and the ASG for Youth Affairs, Dr. Felipe Paullier. But first, I would like to give the floor a little bit to my co-host, Bill Yotive, for some other welcoming words about why we're putting this summit on today and what this really means for the international context. So without further ado, Bill, over to you.
Thank you very much, Philippe. Before I start, I have to say that the summit was Philippe's idea, and he and MUNers Across Borders, they've done all the really heavy lifting, and so we're really great to be a co-host here, but this man here deserves all the credit. We chose this date, the 18th of March, to hold the MUN Summit because it marks the 81st anniversary of the first Model UN. 81 years ago today, a group of college students in upstate New York who had been simulating the League of Nations decided to change course and organize the first ever Model United Nations Conference, 81 years ago today. Now, at the time, the term United Nations did not refer to the institution we know today as the United Nations. It was a term coined by President Roosevelt to refer to 26 countries that had signed what was called the Declaration of the United Nations, in which they pledged to use their full resources to defeat the Axis powers. By 1943, 31 countries had signed the declaration. And so the first Model UN conference was a simulation of delegates from representing these 31 countries that was organized to discuss important international issues, such as the establishment of a new world political organization yet to be named, the enforcement of world peace, economic integration, and the protection of human rights. For 8 decades, Model UN has engaged youth around the world at all educational levels in the work of the United Nations. But it was not until September 2023 that the General Assembly formally recognized this important educational activity and its contributions. On September 1st, 2023, an historic resolution on Model United Nations was adopted by consensus that was supported by and sponsored by 115 countries. The main sponsors of the resolution were Portugal, the Dominican Republic, Egypt, Jamaica. We have to thank the ambassador very much for his support in making this happen, and the Laos People Democratic Republic. It is extraordinary in its breadth and recommendations. The first paragraph of the operative section begins with the words, recognizes the important contribution of Model United Nations to diplomacy and international cooperation, and in building the capacities of young people in the field of international affairs, providing them with the knowledge and opportunities that they need. The next 3 paragraphs go on to make wide-ranging recommendations that encourage member states, the UN system, civil society, and all relevant stakeholders to support and promote Model United Nations and to organize Model United Nations simulations as a means of engaging youth with multilateralism and international cooperation in line with the United Nations core principles and values. This will be noted without a doubt as a significant milestone in the history of Model UN and could mark a turning point in its future. But what that future will be will depend in part on our input and our efforts. The Model UN Summit 2024 is designed to offer you an opportunity to contribute to the conversation that needs to take place on where we are and where we want to go. Now, we know that Model UN is not a monolithic entity. There is no one organization that supervises or oversees how it functions. Different rules and procedures have evolved over time in different regions of the world. The Global Citizen Academy mentions three main styles of simulating UN meetings. The UNA USA style, which is often referred to as the North American style, the Thyman procedure in Europe, and the Wyman approach, which I have been developing over the last 15 years, that grew out of what was called the UN for MUN approach. But there are other procedures with minor differences in other geographic regions around the world. Those of you here today, in person and online, have most likely participated in one or more of these styles of simulating meetings. And so it is expected that the perspectives on where we are and our vision for the future will be diverse. The important point in all of this is that you should be provided with an opportunity to have your voice heard and to participate in the dialogue on where Model UN is going, how it should develop, and how it should be promoted so that its reach across the world expands. During my time leading an educational program at the UN known as the United Nations Global Teaching and Learning Project, Model UN was undoubtedly the one educational activity that engaged students the most at every educational level. But even after eight decades and counting, there is so much more that we can do. And we are happy to be co-host of this summit today with MUNers Across Borders. And on behalf of the World Federation of United Nations Associations, we welcome you to the Model UN Summit 2024 and look forward to hearing your thoughts and recommendations throughout the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. And now we'll swiftly move on to a short pre-recorded video message by the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is from him. Note, when he says the word conference, he of course means summit in this sense.
Thank you for taking part in this Model United Nations conference and for believing in the power of global cooperation to solve global problems. Our world needs your engagement and ideas more than ever. We are living through extremely difficult times. Conflicts are raging, tensions are rising, and our planet is burning. Humanitarian needs are at record highs and human rights are under relentless assault. Hate speech, misinformation and disinformation spread like wildfire on social media. More than ever, we need global solidarity. We need the United Nations. And the United Nations needs you, your energy, creativity, courage and commitment. Together, I know we have what it takes to solve our shared challenges, to heal divisions, repair relations and build peace, to extend a helping hand to all those engulfed by war, climate catastrophe and hunger, to ensure justice and equality for world's women and girls and all marginalized communities, particularly the world's most vulnerable, and to expand opportunities for all, leaving no one behind. We at the United Nations will never give up in our quest for a more peaceful and just world, and I know you won't either. That is why I am fully committed to giving young people a much stronger voice in international affairs. The United Nations is proud to be your ally, and we count on you to be a force for positive change now and in the future. I wish you every success, and I thank you.
A speaker who's joined us in the past. He's been a very good friend of Modern United Nations for many years, before indeed MUNers Across Borders, and that is, of course, Mr. Ambassador Brian Wallace, the Permanent Representative of Jamaica to the United Nations. I believe that microphone should indeed work.
It sounds like it does. Good morning.
Good morning.
Secretary General just spoke about the energy of the youth. And I know it's still early in the morning, but we need you more than ever, as SG said. Well, it is my great honor to be here with you today. I'm so grateful for the invitation. This is the kind of engagement that I always look forward to. Engaging and interacting with our ambassadors in waiting, our young visionaries, our world leaders in training. You are the reflection of the world that is to come. But the world we currently live in has become more polarized and riddled with more planetary crises than we have faced in perhaps the last 100 years, at least since the formation of the United Nations almost 79 years ago. At that time, world governments, through the ratification of the UN Charter, made a collective promise to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, promote social progress and better standards of life for all peoples. And yet, here we are today, in the face of even worsening crises. Now, as disheartening as this may seem, let me assure you, multilateralism in general and the United Nations in particular are even more relevant than ever, as you heard the SG just say. The UN remains the only institutional space imbued with the power to convene member states from every corner of the globe. It is still a center for harmonizing the actions of nations in the attainment of common ends. At first glance, it might not look that way. And although our jobs have become increasingly difficult, the vast majority of sovereign member states have repeatedly demonstrated a willingness to cooperate in order to address the challenges in a constructive way. But what is clear is that we have to acknowledge now that you, the young people, are the valuable and indispensable partners in building a better future. And in building that future, we must be honest about the challenges we face and confront them with vigor and a fervent resolve for change. The world can be better. We will make it better, and you have a part to play. You must play a part. Your engagement is meaningful. Your voice is meaningful. Your ideas are meaningful. Collectively and individually, you have the opportunity to both help to frame and possibly inherit a far better world than we have been able to create for you so far. I'm going to go off script here for a minute, if you will allow me. When the idea of multilateralism arose, there was no doubt that the subjects of this multilateral system were sovereign states, governments representing countries. But what we see in the situation we face now is a new and emerging force in multilateralism. With the advent of technology and the ease of transmission of information, a person in New York can be in real time fully aware of what is going on in the Democratic Republic of Congo. You can know the facts on the ground. You can know what people are saying about it. You can be engaged with the issues that affect everybody on the planet all at the same time. That is power, if harnessed properly. It also presents a great risk. The Secretary General mentioned misinformation and disinformation. But let's look at the positive side of this. What this has done is to give you, the global citizen, a significant role in multilateralism. And Model UN is a great entry into multilateralism as an individual and as a collective. Because Model UN clubs and conferences and summits provide an institutional space for you to practice international diplomacy and cooperation, provides an opportunity for you to learn how the UN works in practice, even if it's just in a simulated way. You will negotiate difficult issues related to poverty, climate change, peace and security, sustainable development, indeed the issues of the day. You may even experience in a small way the frustration of member states as you try to find consensual positions. As was mentioned last year in September, as a result of the cumulative efforts of a core group of states, including Jamaica, Portugal, Egypt, DR, Lao People's Democratic Republic, as well as the World Federation of UN Associations, the General Assembly adopted Resolution 77/336, entitled Model UN. I must confess, when the idea of a resolution came to my desk, I was incredulous that this had not been done up to now. Because I have seen the value of Model UN. And the fact that there was not an institutional relationship with the UN, to my mind, needed to be addressed. So I was very happy and proud to be a part of that core group that led to the resolution. The rationale for the resolution was not only to strengthen Model UN as a whole, but also to raise awareness of the importance of your active participation in multilateralism, to underscore the value of youth engagement within the UN, and to highlight the critical need to build your capacities in this regard. The resolution also calls on all relevant stakeholders, such as the UN Youth Office and the Department of Global Communications, to assist in educating MUN organizers to develop more accurate simulations that are in line with established UN practices and procedures. Ladies and gentlemen, Model UN provides a framework for you to understand on a fundamental level exactly how the UN works. By interacting with this system, it is my hope that it will serve to prepare you for your future as diplomats and leaders, filled with vigor and innovative solutions to potentially fix the gaps in the failing multilateral system as we know it. It is also my hope that this resolution will accomplish all that it says it wants to. Now, we have to acknowledge that this may not happen overnight, but I am certain that with the help of all the relevant stakeholders, the Model UN systems and the UN as a whole will be reinvigorated. My future ambassadors and leaders in training, I am confident that you will be able to take the baton and carry on the work that we are doing today at the UN in earnest, inspired never to repeat the failures which have marred our collective history as a people. In the meantime, we will continue to mobilize for the future by addressing the gaps in the multilateral system as we see it, through processes such as the Summit of the Future and the Declaration on Future Generations. In doing so, it is my sincere hope that we will be able to make a worthy handover to you. I look forward to witnessing the trails you will blaze and the future you will create. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your very kind words and indeed your continual and enduring support to Model United Nations. Now I'm very pleased to introduce the Assistant Secretary General, the first Assistant Secretary General of Youth Affairs, United Nations, stemming from Uruguay, Dr. Felipe Paullier. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Bill. Thank you all the organizers that are part of MUNers Across Borders and the World Federation United Nations Association for inviting us and for convening and organizing everything for today and for this conversation that is starting now. Unfortunately, I will only be part of the open of this summit, but I think it's really interesting to have this space to think discuss, no, how we are building the future of this model, no? Thank you, Ambassador of the Permanent Mission of Jamaica. And thank you specifically and most you guys that are here and that are taking your time to be at this summit. So as our Secretary General pointed and the Ambassador of Jamaica, we are living in a world that is facing more conflicts than any time since World War II. And we are witnessing the accelerated degradation of the planet due to human actions, experiencing democratic backsliding in some regions. So in somehow, the future is kind of alarming. But in front of these complex and interconnected challenges, young people are taking action to change things. However, the inaction is coming from institutions, and this is determining a trust deficit in them. Young people, notably, are excluded from major decision-making spaces, and this creates a growing sense of disappointment and mistrust. All of us believe in the United Nations. That's why we are here. Since its creation, the UN was envisioned to unite stakeholders to tackle the world's greatest challenges. And now, more than ever, we need all stakeholders to join efforts in steering a world onto a more equitable, inclusive, and sustainable path. For this exact reason, that the UN is most necessary than ever, because it's a space more unique than ever. Model UN holds greater relevance than ever. And I said ever a lot of times because I think it reflects the urgency we are facing. We require youth inclusive initiatives in their diversity to restore faith in institutions, because we need institutions. We need people advocating, as you guys, for multilateralism and pushing us to address these global challenges. It is young people as you that play a critical role in challenging the status quo and in setting our world on track for a more sustainable and peaceful future. With more than half of the world's population under 30 years old, 1.9 billion people, this is the largest youth generation ever. And youth represent the greatest opportunity for promoting peace, for promoting human rights, and to achieve sustainable development goals by 2030. I assumed in this created office, created by member states, and that's maybe the big step the UN as a system is taking forward in relation to youth affairs, because it was not an office promoted by the SG. This was an office that the recommendation came from a vision reflected on our common agenda, but that found the support of 193 member states that found important to create a structure in the institution to advance on youth issues. And of course, this doesn't mean that the youth issues have started with the creation of this office. This is just one step forward on advancing on this in a critical moment where trust is at the center of the decisions we need to take and the changes we need to take. So the establishment of this office is backed by strong political support. Strengthening meaningful youth engagement is at the core of the mandate of the United Nations Youth Office, the mandate that member states gave this office. But the UN is an intergovernmental structure. So we need to continue to build on this first step we make, or this new step we make in advancing on youth issues. Meaningful youth engagement shouldn't be a nice thing to have, no? Like a checkbox bringing young people when you're having a discussion, or bringing young people for consultation only. Meaningful youth engagement needs to be a norm in decision-making processes at all levels. But meaningful youth engagement implies a series of things that need to be done. And accountability and continuity is one of those recommendations that should be on the table. Specifically talking about today, as head of the United Nations Youth Office, I welcome the resolution adopted by the General Assembly, putting Model UN as a testament of the pressing need to count with platforms that foster constructive dialogues and global solidarity. And I would like to take the opportunity to give two concrete comments in this specific series of discussion you are starting today. One first thing, Model UN needs to be accessible to all young people in all their diversity, irrespectively on their backgrounds or their identities. Only by removing barriers to participation and barriers that could be financial, logistical, or related to accessibility is the only way we are going to truly representative the diverse array of voices that need to be in the table when we are discussing about meaningful engagement. Model UN cannot be an exclusive space for privileged young people. And I know that you guys believe on that. The answer is in what we need to work together. How we address, how we give answers, it's the big challenge we have. But we need to strive to make Model UN an inclusive and diverse platform for engagement, because that's what youth is, diverse. It's not the same to be young in this region than to be young in the Latin America region. It's not the same to be young when you are between your 20s or you are on your almost your 30s. It's not the same to be young when you're born in the capital of a country that when you're born in a small town. And this diversity needs to be also represented in this kind of discussions. We don't have a unique youth voice, and we should be always clear when we are having this kind of discussions. Second, and I think this summit is a great opportunity considering this specific year we are facing as a system, the Summit of the Future, this summit that is taking place formally in September, but that started a lot of months and maybe years ago with a process that put the first step, which was the launching of a series of recommendations on our common agenda, reflects the necessity and the decision of this system to rethink and to bring changes into the table, to represent and to reflect a United Nations at the day we are having today. So the opportunity Model UN brings during this specific process to bring discussions, ideas, and possibilities of change from young people is unique. So we in the UN Youth Office, and I'm sure that all of us in this conference believe in young voices, not as beneficiaries of something. We believe in young people as partners. And we believe on the capacity of young people, not only to bring discussions, but to bring solutions to the conversations. So I really encourage you guys to have fruitful debate, to have fruitful exchange during this day. And we are open to continue this dialogue on our side. So thank you once again. And on our sides, count with us to support Model UN in all their diversity. In this process, we need to move forward together in rebuilding trust on multilateral system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ASG. Now, we were going to have a bit of a long Q&A, but I understand we ran a bit late, so we'll only have one question. And of course, as I must say, moderator privilege, I'm going to ask it. ASG, you mentioned how you'd like to see more diversity, the inclusion. And I wanted to ask you both, to the Model UN community, so there's us gathered in the room, there's the hundreds joining online, what would you like to see more of that Model UN can do? How can we serve really the values of the United Nations more in our activities? And it's a fairly open question. If there's not one that springs to mind, then that's of course natural, but it's something that we are trying to look towards more, especially with the Summit of the Future. How can we, as one of the largest youth-led civil society initiatives, broadly, really engage more with the international community? So just one question, 1 or 2 minutes, if that's okay, and then we'll move to our interactive session afterwards. I don't know if maybe ASG want to go first, and then Ambassador?
As you want, Ambassador, if you have the microphone. So.
Okay, I will start. So I do feel that this is a very important year, and we have a lot of... I'm an optimistic, so I really believe that we have an opportunity this year. And we need the UN more than ever. We need trust in the UN more than ever. Because the UN is an institution backed on trust. If people don't trust in the UN cannot promote the Sustainable Development Goals. If people don't trust in the UN, how the UN is going to be building peace? If people don't trust in the UN, how we are going to be as an organization defending human rights and promoting human rights across this world. So the intergovernmental process this year is taking place. The summit, but specifically the discussions around the chapter are an opportunity into bringing changes. And I do feel that we need to be more ambitious. And specifically, I think the zero draft of this process, which is in somehow the starting point of a series of negotiations, as you all know, because you have been experiencing Model UN yourself and you've been part of that process, the pact is a series of discussions around some issues, and there are some specificities regarding youth issues, no? And maybe our vision and what we want to support as a youth office, and trying to understand which is the mandate of this office that member states gave us, is trying to bring a series of recommendations that the young people have been advocating for a long time into this organization. So I do feel that we do not should see the process of the summit as something concrete that is happening this year. On youth issues, young people on a series of processes that have been happening in the past, since the UN 75 celebration, Summit of Education, a series of moments, and across all the different summits, young people have been putting the voice, and maybe the more recent is during CSW, what young people are advocating for. It's specifically for established meaningful youth engagement platforms, mechanisms in the formal processes of the United Nations. And I do feel that on that series of recommendations is how you can help us to move together. This is a complex organization. And this complexity is what makes this organization unique, because it's the only organization in the world where you have a platform to discuss 183 member states, but also a platform where civil society has a voice, a platform where private sector has a voice represented in different structures. And this is something unique, but that needs to change. But changes need to be together, no? And I do feel that this specific year, you can help us to push together. So we can have concrete recommendations on the pact that reflects the necessity of meaningful youth engagement and establish not only in some of the bodies of the United Nations. We need to understand that we need to bring young people into all the discussions because it's a matter of representation. When you have half of the population under 30 years old, when you have 1.9 billion people being young, you need to reflect this in the institutions. And unfortunately, institutions are not reflecting these voices. And if we want these institutions to be trustable, we need to bring these voices into the table.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Wallace.
Thank you. I'm going to answer the question in two parts. One, I alluded to earlier when I went off script, and that is the power of your advocacy as a global citizen. ASG just spoke about the trust deficit. One of the reasons for this trust deficit is a lack of understanding of what the UN is, how it operates, how it makes its decisions, how it functions. You know better. You know that the UN, yes, it is an institution in and of itself, but it is primarily a convener of individual member states who cast their votes in a way that affects the outcome. That outcome, though, is very often seen not as the decision of a particular member state or even a group of member states. It is seen as a decision, or in some cases, a failure of the UN. So the member states are provided cover by the institution of the UN, when it is really the member states who have either voted or vetoed decisions. You need to raise awareness about what is really happening. And in doing so, hold those member states accountable. When a veto is cast in the Security Council, it is not the UN that has failed to act. It is a member state that has prevented action from taking place. We need the wider population to understand that. Because if we continue to provide cover for those member states, then there is no pressure on them to change. So that is immense power in your hands. For those of you who follow me, you will hear me talk about this idea of the global citizen and its the power to influence the values of your member states. Because ultimately that is what reflects in foreign policy and in votes in the General Assembly and in the Security Council. Your advocacy can make sure that your values are reflected in those policies, in those votes, and ultimately in what comes out of the UN. So that's a powerful tool. The second thing, I was thinking about it as I was listening to the contextualizing of Model UN. So currently, you are modeling yourselves after the UN. So you are reflecting the image of the UN that you currently see. But there is another interpretation of the word model. And that is a more idealistic version of the reality. So you have an opportunity in your own context as Model UN to demonstrate what that model should be. Instead of taking the UN as it is, with all its weaknesses, look to see how the UN could be better. And hopefully have the UN model itself from you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We will take both of these answers on board. And I really do see the idea of stimulating, for example, the Summit for the Future as a Model UN maybe as ways to bring in ideas. And as you say, modeling more idealistically. Let's go back to almost before 18th of March, 1943 and think what do we want it to be rather than what it is. So I just want everyone to give another small round of applause for our opening ceremony speakers. We have shipped all the way from Belgium some of the finest gifts that MUNers Across Borders could bring. And whilst we would gladly give them to you, I would encourage everyone to go to slido.com and log into our small interactive presentation. We'll make this a bit shorter and we'll start the next panel at around 10:10, so running 10 minutes delay. But please do make sure to scan the QR code and join the interactive session.